All right, so we're back with round two of Triad Wars 2. This is a tournament with four human players taking on four AI. To recap round one, Piggy and Brenn both took a single game to advance to round two, while Turdz and Delial each took two games, but I think they both played pretty well, except for Deli, as we all know, always plays terribly. No one at any point changed hands after a tie, so we've never seen a hand change. First turn and second turn each won two games apiece. There's not been a clear advantage on the rule sets I've put up so far. We've only done one round for either turn that's apparent. I liked Brenn's game the most in the first round. I thought it had a good logic to it, and he did draw the tricky AI. Most rounds there's going to be an AI that's a little tougher, or maybe an AI that's a little easier than the others, and Brenn, I thought, had the toughest AI and played a very nice game against it. And we are still left with the question, will humans or AIs prevail? We've got four humans, we've got 60 AIs. Can a human outlast all of the AI? So our rule set is level 1 through 7, no stips. You can do anything you want. Same wall is on, so if you used rares, you might be able to have a little bonus to them, though I tend to be skeptical of rares, so we'll see if anyone went for that. But a very open rule set. I wanted to just let people go with whatever lameness they wanted to. But I think level 7 is a good level in that, like, if you take level 4, people just spam 7 6 3 2s, throw in a 7 6 4 3, but there's only a couple of those. I only really remember one, the 3 6 7 4. And, level 5, it's like all 6 7 6 3s. But level 7, there's a bunch of ways to go with it, so I thought it would be a more interesting version. I personally really like 8 7 6 4s, but 8 8s are really good, 8 7 5 4s are really good. What else is good? 7 5 7 5s. People love those because they're very strong. 6 8 1 8 type stuff is pretty powerful. There's just a lot of different options that I think are viable, and that makes for a level that I think is enjoyable even without stipulations to make it more complex. So our first round is our first game played. I'm doing it in the order these games were played. This round went very quickly. Everyone was really on the ball getting me their moves. Was Brenn versus Quistis Trepe. First turn went to Brenn. As always, the human player will be in blue. If humans reach each other at the end of the tournament, we'll get to see one of them having to take the red cards, because I am too lazy to set up two graphics, one for each player, where each of them gets to be blue in their own graphic. So one of them will have to take red. But here we see Brenn went for a couple 8 8s, one 8 7 6 4, and then 8 7 7s, which are a sort of interesting choice that they tend not to be for me, but they clearly have a lot of raw power. And if there's a type of card I underestimate, it's kind of raw power without clear plus wall synergy. And so this is the kind of card I would tend not to use, but is probably better than I think of it being. And I think Quistis's hand is a little bit of a mess. Yeah, it should be fairly apparent. So Brenn started with 1 8 7 7 and 4, and I immediately thought his first game, his opponent played in 6, and he replied in 4. So Brenn has started both games with a move in 4, and clearly a defensively oriented move in 4, ready to recapture with an 8 facing out. And the opponent can take an 8 in 1 from 2, but cannot take an out facing 8 in 7. So clearly starting to build up, very similar to what he did the first game, a strong defensive position. The opponent went for safety, but as Brenn mentioned after the game, actually, he thought this was a bad move because it didn't let them cover 1. They gave up their only way to plus wall an 8. And so while Quistis gets a safe card, Brenn gets another safe card. And here, just a very defensive game in this one. Quistis went for safety, and again, Brenn could reply with safety. And we're left with this interesting endgame where every card is safe, but it's not so clear Quistis has anywhere to go here, right? They don't want to go in 9 because that's going to set up Brenn on one of the other cards or just be very vulnerable and hard to recapture itself. You don't want to go 5 because that just locks in your opponent's cards. So it's appealing to go in 6 or 8, but there's not a particularly good setup. So she tried 8 7 5 5 in 8, setting up a plus in 5. And if Brenn plays in 9 or something, this does indeed get a tie, but instead Brenn cleverly blocks 5, and this sets up a move in 6, and Silver Dragon will be a sweeper in 9 at the end, and this is a win. And it was winning from move 5, I think. And Brenn wins 6-4 and advances. A very clean game. The only capture in the game was on the final move. I think this Brenn's very defensive strategy worked really well against this also defensive AI, where he was better at the defense essentially and advanced. I have a quote from him about the game, or what did he say? I should have had this up already. My bad. Right. So Brenn mentioned after the game that level 7 was always his preferred level. He had a hand on his second account that had 100 wins and 5 losses on it, starring Katablipas, the 1877 that he started with here, and he tried to recreate it, but he doesn't have that exact hand. It's been lost to time, as many of the great hands have been. But this hand is designed to set up a defensive structure against whatever the opponent does. And I think he did a very nice job of it here and advances really comfortably to the next round. I guess the one knock on the game is the opponent's hand was pretty clearly a mess, and every other player will face a tougher opposing hand. But I think Brenn handled this really solidly. Really convincing win. So then we have Turdz' game. Turdz is the hand in blue. He went for a more traditionally powerful hand, I think. We'll see the 5-7-5-7 in a bunch of human hands, but we'll never see the 7-5-7-5 in a human hand, which I thought was sort of curious. Using Gafgarian and the 4-6-8-6 gives a lot of just pure ability to capture 8s. 4-8-7-6, Harloot and Silver Dragon, 7-6-4-8 are a classic powerful combination. So just a lot of powerful cards here in Turdz' hand, but not an obvious starter. So I thought this hand, I love every card in it. I think they're all really powerful cards, but it's not obvious how they're going to synergize together. Grahf's hand is what I like to think of as a 3-corners hand. And I think this is a pretty solid way to build hands. So it's got its starting corner in 4-8-8-5, designed to go in 1. And then it has these 2 utility cards just designed to capture it back. So 6-8-1-8 for 2 and 7-5-7-5 for 4. And I think the best way to make these hands is to have those cards be the cards that can plus wall securely your starter, but then have the most additional power. And these are both powerful card types. And then the 3rd and 4th cards in your hand are cards that are adjacent corners to your starting corner, designed to retake the capturing cards. So 6-8-1-8 and 2 can be recaptured by 5-4-8-7 and 3, which plus walls it and has a maximum 8 facing out. And 7-5-7-5 and 4 can be recaptured by 7-8-4-5 and 7, with a maximum 8 facing out. So I like this type of hand. I guess my one note on it is it sometimes has trouble with kind of opposite corners. It's very oriented to take towards itself and to take its own starter, but it doesn't have a corner for the bottom right, though 6-8-1-8 could work as that. But often I find if you start in one corner and they play in the opposite corner, these 3-corner hands don't necessarily end up right, though there are some cues where they look really, really good. So anyways, Turdz plays 4-8-7-6 and 4, and we have another starter in 4. And oh yeah, I wanted to say about Brenn's game. Can we go back? Is this scrolling? There we go. Okay. If we go back to Brenn's game, in his first game, in the first round, they played in 6, he replied in 4. They played in 7, he replied in 1. What happened here? Well, they played in 7, he replied in 1. And then his third move was in 3, this time the third move's in 2, but very similar occupation of those squares. And I thought it was interesting that he played a very similar game to his first round game. Okay, on to the Turdz game. So Turdz goes for a side starter, also starts in 4, just like Brenn did. And with a very different idea, however. Because Brenn's idea was to build out safety, and Turdz' hand does not have another 8 to the right. Turdz' hand is very much, I can play here and not offer you safety in either 1 or 7. So a very different handling of the side starter. I kind of think of them as defensive versus aggressive side starters, and I think the contrast here is pretty strong. I actually made a mistake here. I sent Turdz the wrong move, then realized I hadn't followed what the AI is supposed to do and sent him the right one. And kindly, he was like, that's fine, we'll just continue with the move you sent. But I did screw up here. I make mistakes. So 6-8-1-8 has the 8 facing out, which Turdz can only capture with 4-6-8-6 or 5-7-5-7. And the potential idea is, what's the AI named this round? Grahf. Grahf can potentially combo back in 7, comboing the card in 4, which will take the card in 1. So taking from 2 can be tricky. And Turdz played a really interesting move here. Turdz went in 6. And this is a move I've talked to him a bunch about, a move type, because apparently it shows up a lot in closed, but is not so oftenly played in open, but is an idea he's liked and has used occasionally, though never really in tournaments. But we can see the ideas here. We don't really want to take in 2 because they could then combo back from 7. But if we have a counter combo in 5, and in fact the card we have the combo in 5 with, Silver Dragon 7648, is also our card for 7, now we really are threatening to play 2, because we can combo things back from either 5 or 7. We now have 2 threat squares, instead of we play 2, they combo back from 7, and we're left without a move. Now we play 2, if they combo in either 5 or 7, we combo back from the other one. So it's creating that second combo square, and it's really not conceding all that much, right? If the opponent goes in 3, even if they could play safely there, if we play 2, even if we don't lock in 3, we could lock in 1, and again, if they combo it back, we'll combo that back. So the kind of obvious squares it might be giving up are not necessarily that big a loss. Really interesting move. Like, if I had this position, I would probably just play like 5-7, 5-7, and 7, because it's safe and seems like a good way to build out. And I think that's a good move too. But very creative, nice move from Turdz here. The AI goes for safety, and Turdz just sets up the S. And this is a very strong S. Both his cards are really dominant going side to side. We might think giving up Silver Dragon would be giving up too much side to side power for an S, but the remaining cards are great. 4-6-8-6 dominates the top row, 5-7-5-7 dominates the bottom row. This is an incredibly difficult position to save. There is in fact one save, and if you can find it, I will be really impressed. I don't want to reveal it. I'd love it if you find it, please send it along to me. Quite hard save to find, given that there are only 4 moves left. Really tricky position. And we'll have another puzzle later where there's a just very difficult position to save. And if you can find the save, massive kudos, because these are very tricky saves. Grahf ends up locking in the 6-8-1-8, but this is certainly not enough. Turdz just captures, goes up 6-4, and is going to capture again at the end. And in fact, they don't even have a card that can put an 8 that isn't comboed. Can we go to the next slide? There we go. And Turdz wins 7-3. I screwed up the graphic. You'll notice I didn't flip Zeal to blue. My bad. This shows that I am doing the graphics by hand. It's not automated to work properly. That came up in a later game, though I did correct it by then. Shame I didn't correct it this time. But Turdz wins 7-3, which is the only 7-3 win we've had. And I think a really nice win with a very creative offbeat move in 6 that, as he said afterwards, well, he said, the move in 6 is not one I played often myself, but had it used against me and thought it worked well here. It can go one of 2 ways from there, really. Either lead to a strong S or T, as happened here, it basically blocks the ability for them to capture the card in 4 in most instances by adding pressure on 5 to the already existing pressure in 7, as it sets up a secured combo for me on the other side. Much of this I already said, probably just paraphrasing him rather than my own thoughts. And the rest of my hand could deal with almost anything they did, apart from their safe capture in 9. A sensible move, but I knew I couldn't lose after that. Yeah, and I would just add another thing he said that I didn't write down here was the thing of having this move used against him was something where it seems kind of strange, and then you see it used, and suddenly it makes a ton of sense what it achieves. And I think that's so important to improving at this game, is seeing a move you're not familiar with and figuring out what the logic is and incorporating it into your kind of repertoire of thoughts. And I think Turdz did a really nice job here. He also says, so really I could see they wanted to lure me into a big combo by capturing 1 at some point. This took the sting out of that and turned it on its head. It's a more aggressive type of move than you might think. Yeah, and this was a great showcase for it. This is a really cool game, original game to my understandings. This is not a type of move I see that often, and very nicely played. And Turdz advances to round 3. So now we have Piggyman versus Serph. And we can immediately tell Piggy is a very different hand maker than we've seen so far, right? There's no 8-7-6-4s, there's no 8-8 corners. Instead, there's a pair of complementary rares, and then another pair of cards in the 5-8-7-2s. We also see 3 of these cards are level 6 cards. No one else is dipped to using level 6 cards, and Piggy is using 3 of them. So just a very different way to look at a hand. I think we see some of Piggy's normal ideas here, which is he really likes pairs. They play off each other. He loves sames. He's talked about that. I talked about that in my video on Piggy. And one of his classic articles is about building a hand with two complementary pairs of cards, and then a fifth that they can play off nicely. And I think that's what we see here. But we also see a willingness to use significantly weaker cards than other people are using, and cards that just have much rarer number combinations. You know, this hand is obviously looking to play off twos. The opponent's not going to be able to play off twos. And so anyways, I think it's a creative, interesting hand, and I was excited to see him handle first turn. And he plays the non-paired card in 5. And we can immediately see there's a bunch of potential combos. The 5, 8, 7, 2s each can plus wallet from the side, and each can also plus wallet from above or below, as can the rares. However, the hand has very minimal power left, right? The rares have only 2 directions they have any significant power, and the other cards are corner cards, right? They have 2 directions of real power. And the directions they have power is somewhat redundant with the directions the rares have power. So we have a lot of potential synergy later, but relatively weak cards on their own. And the question with this kind of hand is always, how much can you make the synergy make up for their intrinsic weakness? And that is the question. So his opponent, Serph here, goes 4, 6, 8, 7, and 3, setting up a same in 6 and a plus with the same card in 2. And Piggy does not have the same combos here. He can take that card from both squares, but he doesn't have the same kind of power towards it. And it's going to be interesting to see, you know, how do you set up here? And I think he picks a move that makes a lot of sense to me. Actually, he sent me the wrong move at first, and then we went back. He sent me 2A, 4, 2, and 2. And I started thinking, that's really interesting, because the idea is the opponent can, you know, lock everything in from 6, but to do so, they'll have to flip 5, and then Piggy potentially has a lot of counter combos down the road, because 5 flips 2, so he could same wall immediately from 2, or hold on and threaten 5 later, and potentially set up big combos. But I don't think that was a very good move, because if he goes in 2 like that, the opponent can just go in 1 and block one of the big combo squares and not flip 5. And I think when you're playing against Piggy's hands, so much of what they're doing is this ability to play off each other and accepting weaker cards that do that. And if you don't flip 5, it can be a lot less scary. Well, if you flip 5, there are going to be, you know, plus walls that you, or pluses that you just didn't see coming. So instead, Piggy goes in 4. And this makes a bunch of sense, because if you look at Piggy's hands, it is much better oriented to go horizontal than to go vertical. So this both sets up same walls in 1 and 7. So if this is ever flipped, potentially there's big combos down the road, right? The other rare, 422A, Mog, has a same wall in 7, has a plus wall in 8. If those cards ever get flipped, that's going to be very dangerous for the AI here. And Piggy's hand is side to side, so we want to direct the game horizontally, so it makes a lot more sense to go in 4, I think, than it does to make a move in 8. But again, we have this problem of limited power. So if the opponent starts kind of just blocking squares that are a little awkward to take, you know, something like 4, 7, 7, 5 in 7, right? If you take that, they could retake anything you take with, because you'd only have a 2 outfacing with 8, 7, 6, 4, and 9, and you wouldn't be able to take that, right? We're going to have to deal with having limited general power in exchange for the kind of synergies Pigs is going to create. And we've given up some safe squares. So the AI immediately goes for a safe square in 2 with an 8 outfacing. And Piggy cannot give up the 1 square, so he occupies it. And the AI plays in 7 with the only card that Piggy couldn't combo back, because either of the 7 outs Piggy would be able to plus. And here, little tricky to find the way to a tie, but Piggy finds one of the ways with 422A and 6. And the 7258 is going to be able to take enough on the bottom row to hold this game. And they tie 5-5 and advance to game 2, where Piggy becomes the first player in the tournament to switch his hand. So he came with a backup hand, and it is a classic because it has Galagros, and Piggy's most famous hand was a same plus combo hand on level 5 starring Galagros. You'll notice now Piggy, not satisfied with having played 3 level 6 cards, has dropped to using a level 5 card. And we can also see, again, the pairs. Portal to the Abyss and Genova Synthesis, the 6818 types, are opposites, as are the 5758 and 5857. So still building around opposites, still building around a central setup card, and a very horizontally focused hand. And I think a lot of the question of how this hand will work is how much can you direct the game horizontally? Because if the game is directed up and down, this hand's going to be in a lot of trouble. So the opponent starts, and the opponent starts in 6. And I don't think this is like a particularly bad move or something. It's something they can recapture easily. Pigs could play safely next to it, but you can start building out from here. And maybe pigs should, say, go with one of the 8s out facing a 9 or something. Just take safety and work from there. But I think if you're facing this kind of hand, it makes sense to play on the top or bottom row, to me. Just making sure the game has some up-down directionality. Though, you know, the cards have some ability, Piggy's cards have some ability to play up and down, and if they can fill the middle row with like 5s down, maybe they can really play off that well. And that's actually kind of what's going to happen, is instead of going for safety, Pig goes, you know, I thought about it, but I have to play Galagros in 5. That's what I try to build off of with hands like this. And it's fun to see people, it's fun to see Galagros in action again, really, because I think Piggy's Galagros hand on level 5 is one of the all-time classic hands. The opponent goes in 4, and ooh, now we're having some up-down problems, right? Because that card we can't take either way. The 7457 we cannot take from above. And so we're left with a hand that has a lot of potential synergy, but we have to set them all up, right? We have a couple captures right now, but not many for how many cards are on board. And so it's one of those things of our hand can do things, but it needs to get the cards on board such that they can play off each other. And if it never sets things up, we're just not going to be able to take enough things to win or tie. And so definitely a dangerous spot. My thought watching this was kind of either we find a clear plan or we try to direct the game so much side to side that our side to side power can dominate. And Piggy ends up finding a plan. He ends up playing 1-8, 6-8, and 8, willingly staying down 6-4, but again with that sort of, if at some point Galagros flips, I'll be able to set up more combos. And this is something I really like in Pig's play, is even when he doesn't have the combos now, he kind of trusts his hand and his cards to set them up later. And here, it looks to me like Red has a lot more combo potential. You know, 4775 has both 1 and 3 for plus walls, and Piggy doesn't even have the plus wall in 2 anymore. But this understanding that his hands will bring combos down the road is a really neat thing to watch, I think, and makes his style of play quite entertaining, because he doesn't have the combos yet. And you can see this if you look at my Brilliant Move series, where I show some analysis that partially comes from Piggy, that the hand doesn't necessarily have the combos right now, but it will build them down the road. And I think this is also just one of the things that made Piggy such a strong player just in general games, is he would test his hands and figure out all these weird little synergies down the road, and something that made it tougher to play in tournaments, because in a tournament format, you're probably not doing extensive testing of your hand beforehand, you know, like you're not going to find people playing this exact weird rule set with these stipulations. So you're not going to have the same type of testing before playing it, and you're not going to be as used to setting up or discovering what the synergies are that he would often do a lot of testing to find. So here, the opponent's gonna block 7 or 9, and the question of which I think is not obvious at all. But I think the core to Red's position is going to be 4-7-7-5 in 1 or 3 can set up a big combo down the road. So the question is, when you go in 1 of 7 or 9 as the red player, Piggy probably has to block the other, and he's going to be flipping either 4 or 6. Which one do you want to be able to set up to flip back? I think if you were calculating this position, that would be the kind of road of reasoning you'd want to go down. So the AI plays normal move, good looking move, 5-8, 8-4, 8, and 9, locking in a couple cards. Piggy gets to capture back. It's 5-5. And the AI can take a 6-4 lead, but Piggy has the tie well in hand with the same in 2, and we tie 5-5. And I thought that card in 2 started looking like Kefka. Now it doesn't look quite as much like Kefka to me, but doesn't that look a bit like Kefka? Anyways, it's a card from FF14. So we tie again and move on to game 3. And Piggy again changes his hand. And this time he goes for something more traditional. I believe these are all level 7s, though maybe one of them's a level 6. I'm not sure. He doesn't quite pair all the cards. The 8-8-5-2s are not exactly paired, but they're very close to paired. The 8-6-3-6s give up down, and the 5-7-5-7. This looks very similar to the hand Turdz ended up playing, except Turdz had 8-7-6-4s where Piggy has chosen 8-8s, and Turdz had 8-6-4-6s where Piggy has chosen 8-6-3-6s. And there's some argument for both. I always lean towards 8-6-4-6s, but the 8-6-3-6s say one side of me deals with 8s, the 8-6 stuff, and the 6-3 stuff deals with 7s really well. And if I have something to play off in 5, maybe the 8-6 part can deal with 8s as well. And Piggy starts with a corner, which the hand the AI has been using, Serph is using, cannot take. But Serph has a way to set up in 5 against both sides, so Serph takes that, and Piggy sets up the other corner. And we're left with an interesting spot, because I think this is actually a really dangerous spot for Piggy, and I kind of want to get at why. And I think it's sort of because the 8-6-3-6 is a little bit dead in his hand, as is the 3-6-8-6, right? Both of the 8-6-3 types only have one square they have an important capture. And we can see where 8-6-4-6s would have been a lot better in this spot, because like the 8-6-3-6 is only good in 4 right now and doesn't even have the double capture. And an 8-6-4-6 would have also been good in 8, and I think that would have given a lot more maneuverability here. And I like 8-6-3-6s. It's hard to tell, which is going to be good in which spot. And I think one of the ideas in his hand is what can play off 5s. Well, an 8 and a 3 can plus wall 5s, an 8 and a 4 can't. But I think this is one of those times when the 8-6-3-6s are kind of costly here. And the 5-7-5-7 is needed for both 2 and 8. And so if it starts being needed for anything else, the question is going to be, how can we get the other cards out of our hand? Because that's probably going to be the card we'll be forced to hold on to until the end. And if that's the card we're going to be forced to hold on to until the end, we're really going to need the game to be sideways, because that is not a good up-down card. So I think the AI makes a really good move in 8, and I think this is actually just lost for Piggy. I couldn't find a save here. I think basically now the 8-6-3-6 is dead, and we kind of got to find a use for it. But the 8-6-3-6, the only square that's kind of structurally correct to go in is 2. But it's not doing much there, and we didn't want an up-down game that an S would give. Piggy ends up, I think, quite reasonably going for the Q. But Serph gets to lock in 2 cards, going in 3, locking in the card in 6, and this is definitely a loss at this point. Any move in 2 is very powerfully met by the combo in 4. Even though Piggy has the plus back, it doesn't flip anything extra, doesn't combo anything extra. Piggy decides to block 4, and the opponent takes the win in 7. And that's a win, and Piggy goes out. So I want to say, first of all, huge thanks to Piggy for playing this tournament. It's like, he's one of the most enjoyable players to watch. I think it's kind of fitting that he ended up going out with his most standard hand of the ones he played. But I also think it speaks to how incredible a player Piggy was, which is he was using these hands that clearly use weaker cards than the others are using. There's a reason people called various cards lame. It's because they're very powerful and more straightforward to use. And Piggy would rely on being able to create synergies that weren't there yet, and on using cards that were both lower level or just generally weaker than what other opponents were using. And he still had this incredible run where he had 2 or 3 semifinals in very quick succession. He's like a 65% winner of tournament games, which I think he's slightly higher than both Brenn and Turdz in just tournament game win percentage. And he did it using cards that were just weaker than what other people were using. And you can understand how he'd be such a good hand maker when he had time to playtest. And in tournaments, you didn't really have that opportunity, and he was still that good. And so it was a pleasure to watch his games and have him playing. It's a real shame for me that he went out this early, and probably for you, the viewer, too. But I think in a way it speaks to sort of how big a handicap he was giving himself while playing. And it's been a long time since he's played serious games, since he's played games at all. And he's not in the form he was. It doesn't quite click the way it did. And I don't know. I think it speaks to what a tremendous player he was, that he was taking on these weaker hands and regularly beating people around his, strength level. And I have him, somewhere in the top 30 of all time, as we'll get to in my video series. But he was doing more creative offbeat things than I think just about anyone else was in that top 30. And it was a pleasure to have him in this tournament. And sadly, he is the first human to go out. And now we come to Delial, who takes on Jan Rosencran from Vagrant Story. Delia's first turn. I want to say in advance, I really like the hand I made for Jan Rosencran, so I'm going to talk about that briefly. The idea is to put the 2, 7, 5, 8, and 5, and then the 8, 3, 5, 8 can go in either 3 or 9, and the 5, 2, 8, 7 is really good at plussing, saming, or, capturing that back. And at the same time, on the other side of the board, the 8, 7, 5, 3 can go in 1 or 7, and the 5, 8, 8, 3 will then have recaptures on it from every side. So I thought this was a fun hand that went together kind of well using slightly off the beaten path cards. Deli, on the other hand, went with a more traditional hand, very much one utility card in the 5, 7, 5, 7, and then 4 corner cards to play around it and hopefully play off it. And Deli begins with the utility in 5, leaving him with balanced directional strength. And the AI says, "Aha! I intended to play 2, 7, 5, 8, and 5. I see your card has that 7, 5, 2. So I can play 8, 3, 5, 8, and my 5, 2, 8, 7 will be fantastic at capturing it back. And you don't have any cards that can double capture it. You only have one way to capture it from 8. And I have one that can capture it from both 6 and 8 in perfect secure style." So Deli thought for a bit and went in 1, which I think makes sense. It really sets up the 7, 8, 6, 4 nicely. It can also play with the 4, 6, 8, 7, and it doesn't give up any of the captures on Jan's card in 9. And the AI plays 8, 7, 5, 3, and 3, which is not the most challenging move because it is not something that is testing to any of the cards in Deli's hand, right? No card, maybe the 4, 6, 8, 7 will have a little trouble, but Deli's hand in general will have a very easy time capturing that. It sets up Sphinxara in 2, so it's not the most testing move, but I think it also makes a bunch of sense, right? It sets up a bunch of Jan's cards even better. The 2, 7, 5, 8 is now fantastic in 2. The 5, 2, 8, 7 and 4 or in 6 really likes to see it. It does not use up a card that is needed for recaptures because 5, 8, 8, 3 can work in 4 as well. Though it probably would be a good card to hang on to given that, most of the squares left open are in the bottom left and it is a strong card in the bottom left. But I think this kind of move makes a lot of sense. It is not a move that is going to win super often because it will often be an easy card for first turn to recapture at the end. But it is a move that is going to be solid and give ties, I think, a high percentage of the time. So Deli thought a while here and complained about the difficulty level of the AI because he's used to AIs that are not smart at triple triad. Before playing 4, 6, 8, 7, and 8. And this is a really interesting move, so I want to talk about it for a little bit, which is if we look at this position, and we think also about the last game with Piggy and where he got in trouble, was there were cards that were dead in his hand, that didn't have enough squares they were useful, and he ends up in a position where he has to hold on to this card and he has to find ways to get rid of these cards usefully, but the opponent is already flipping and threatening to lock stuff in, and if he's going to fight that, he's going to have to hold on to cards he doesn't want to hold on to. He needs to get out of his hand too long. And if we look at Deli's hand, which cards are good? Well, 7864 is really good in the bottom left. It's really good in 2. It's really good in 4. It's good in 8. It's probably good in 7 at taking whatever it needs to there. That card's really powerful. The 8358 is now excellent in 2. It's excellent in 6. It might have some play in 8 or 7. But the 4687 is weaker. It has play in 2, but everything in the hand has play in 2, so that is completely redundant. Has a tiny bit of play in 6 in that it takes 9, but this is minimal, and it has no play in either 4 or 8. So one move that comes to mind is just to dump it in 7 and set up, the standard X with a card you don't particularly want. But it doesn't give us great moves to play in 8. Both our cards can work in 8 after, but neither has a double capture. And so I really like Deli's idea of using it in 8, both because I think it's the dead card in the hand. He should be looking to get rid of this card, but also because it sets stuff up in a way that 9 doesn't, right? Because as soon as you start calculating lines from this position, you'll notice a big problem is at some point, Jan Rosencran will go 5, 8, 8, 3, and 4, and it'll have an 8 down, and we can't take that. And if we still, if 2 is still available, we'll combo from 2. But anytime we're going in 2, they can reply with that card in 4. And we don't have a way to take it. And this gets the worst card out of our hand and sets up a key plus in 7 against any 8 facing down. So I'm going to say, looked at this position. There is a tie for red. I think this is even harder to find than the tie against Turdz was, though maybe views will differ. Red has a tie. It's very obscure. It takes a bunch of calculation to prove works. But there is a tie here for red. I'll be, again, really impressed if anyone finds it. The AI did not find it. I think just awesome move by Deli in 8. Applied a ton of pressure. The AI makes the completely conventional normal move, fitting something in with a perfect 3-way same. But Deli can recapture and now leads 6-4 because it also combos the card in 8, though the specific score doesn't really matter. The point is the 7-8-6-4 now completely dominates the endgame. It's 6 downward is enough to take anything. It's 7 and 8. Given that card he put in 8, now captures anything facing down, including an 8, and Deli wins 6-4. And I think this is my pick for game of the round because I really like Deli's move in 8. I think in general, in that kind of almost X structure, sometimes you look within the structure. So with cards in 1, 3, 5, and 9, you often look to 2 or 6. Those are cards where you can lock it in. It can be safe forever. And of course, people always look at the X, moves in 7. But moves in 4 or 8 there are harder to find, especially one that doesn't flip anything. And that the idea is it gets the worst card out of your hand and sets up pluses much further down the road, which we saw pay off here. I think this is a really clever move. I was intending to give Turdz game of the round because I really liked his round. But I will also say Deli had the trickiest AI this round. As I've said, there's kind of each round, there's one AI that's a bit trickier, and it was the one Deli had, and that he beat it in such nice fashion with such a high-pressure move in 8. I thought was really cool. And I really like this game. And I really like Turdz's game too, and Brenn's was very solid, and Piggy's I feel sad about. So that's the end of round 2. There are now 3 humans left. Can one of them take down the prize, or will my AIs get them? So far, Brenn is the only player to not give up a single tie. Deli and Turdz have given up 1 tie apiece, and Brenn has given up none. This, of course, doesn't matter, because if you give up 5 ties and then win, that's just as good as advancing immediately. But interesting trivia if you're looking at the players. I also think they've had very different styles. Obviously, Piggy has an incredibly unique style, but Brenn has really showcased very solid defensive play. Turdz, as we saw, is just clearly going with more aggressive stuff. They both played these side starters in 4, and one's was a very aggressive version of it, where he followed it up with this creative move in 6, and the other's was this very solid defensive version that built out safety from there and went on to win very solidly and very sensibly. And then Deli had the most kind of wide open structure in his game and found this really good move in 8 to just apply a ton of pressure that I think most humans don't have any chance to defend against either. Really nice game. Really nice round, I think. And hope you enjoyed it. Curious if people think humans or AIs will prevail. This was just round 2. The AIs are going to keep getting better. and humans slip. But we have 3 really strong humans left, and we sadly lost one. And I'm really curious to see what happens because I don't know who the favorite is, if it's humans or AI. And if it is humans, I don't know who will be the player who actually brings it home. So I'm excited. I hope you are too. And I'll try to have round 3 and then the quarterfinals in the near future. And again, if you have any interest in playing these tournaments, whether you're great at Triple Triad, whether you're bad, please message me. I'd love to have more players. Yeah, I guess that's everything.